The next gold rush, the next boom, the next market mania is coming. Hold on to your seat. America has been a ship riding the waves of irrational exuberance for hundreds of years, and she's not likely to change course anytime soon. It's in our blood. Captains outrageous. America has been good to hypomanics, a land of opportunity that has liberated their energies and lifted their spirits. In return, hypomanic Americans have been good to America, powering a wilderness colony ahead of every other nation on the planet in just a few hundred years. They may be our greatest natural resource. An untold number of hypomanics helped make America the richest nation on earth. This book tells the stories of just a few. It was not easy choosing the people to focus on, nor was it a scientific selection process. There were so many candidates to choose from to show America's development through a kind of time-lapse photography. I searched for people from each century of our 500-year history who played a leading role in America's growth, especially her economic growth. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Prophets such as John Winthrop, Roger Williams, and William Penn populated it. Alexander Hamilton was one of a handful of men who conceived its national future and economic potential. Andrew Carnegie sparked an industrial revolution that led to mass production. The Selznick and Mayer families helped create Hollywood, usher in the age of mass media and portray a national self-image. And Craig Venter cracked our genetic code, the implications of which are only beginning to be fathomed. Each chapter of this book is a small biography written by a psychologist. There are also clinical case histories that illustrate hypomania in action. These men were outrageous, arrogant, provocative, unconventional, and unpredictable. They were not well adjusted by ordinary standards, but instead forced the world to adjust to them. Their stories are inspiring, comical, and sometimes tragic, as the hubris that fueled their improbable rise often led to their fall as well. Yet without their irrational confidence, ambitious vision, and unstoppable zeal, these outrageous captains would never have sailed into unknown waters, never discovered new worlds, never changed the course of our history. I have never met Mr. Lewis or Mr. Gross, and am not suggesting that either man has a mental illness. As shall be explained further on, hypomania must alternate with depression for a person to meet the criteria for a bipolar disorder, and there is no reason to believe that either man has suffered from depression. I cannot even say for certain that either man meets full criteria for hypomania. Rather, I'm using these men as examples to illustrate some of the traits of hypomania found among successful entrepreneurs. The few large-scale NIMH-funded epidemiological studies that have included measures of hypomania have measured it in a way that some grossly underestimated its frequency. Some studies have found hypomania in only 0.1% of the population. The first question they ask is, have you been in an unusually good mood? So good that you were a little high or out of control? If the answer to this STEM question is no, the interviewer discontinues asking about symptoms of hypomania. The problem with this approach, according to Jules Angst of Zurich University, is that hypomanics don't feel they are high or out of control when they are hypomanic. So of course they say no. Angst and his colleagues found that if their STEM question was, have you had a period of greatly increased energy, the rates of hypomania came closer to the 5 to 10% range. Christopher Columbus, Messianic entrepreneur. Christopher Columbus is the archetype of the American entrepreneur. Like the internet CEOs of the 1990s, he boasted that he would change the world and get rich doing it. In that respect, you couldn't have picked a better person to find America. Columbus was always a messianic character, but his special sense of destiny evolved into a grandiose delusional system. Unlike most of the characters in this book, Columbus may have crossed the line into mania. The vision. Columbus claimed it was a divine revelation that launched him on his voyage of discovery. With a hand that could be felt, the Lord opened my mind to the fact that it would be possible to sail from here to the Indies, and he opened my will to desire to accomplish the project. From that moment, the drive to sail west in search of the Far East became a fire that burned within me. Continually, without a moment's hesitation, the scriptures urged me to press forward with great haste. Columbus claimed he heard celestial voices, and on one occasion he wrote that the Holy Spirit had spoken to him, announcing, "God will cause your name to be wonderfully proclaimed throughout the world, and give you the keys of the gates to the ocean, which are closed with strong chains." 39% of manic patients report religious revelations similar to those described by Columbus. These patients experience intense feelings of well-being and closeness to God, along with the sense that some great secret truths have been revealed to them. The revelation feels hyper-real, that is, more real than normal reality. These experiences are remarkably analogous to the beatific and mystical experiences of saints and other religious leaders, wrote Goodwin and Jameson. They are usually accompanied by the conviction that one has been chosen for a unique mission of cosmic importance. The urgent sense of moral imperative to accomplish the mission is intense. Hypomanics also can have revelatory experiences, but unlike the manics, theirs are not accompanied by hallucinations or bizarre, grandiose beliefs. According to Columbus, God assigned him a much greater role in history than just discovering the westward passage to the east. God had predestined Columbus to play a heroic role in the recapture of the Holy Land as well. Columbus proclaimed that he would find large quantities of gold in the Indies, and he urged King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain to use these funds to recapture Jerusalem. In the log of his first voyage, he would write to the sovereigns, reminding them of his plan. "I urge your highness to spend all the profit of this, my enterprise, on the conquest of Jerusalem." And your highness laughed and said it would please you, and even without that profit you would desire it. From the very beginning, Columbus clearly had an idea of launching a crusade. In 1493, he gave himself a new name and began signing documents Christophorens. This idiosyncratically Latinized version of his name means Christ bearer. As if that weren't peculiar enough, on virtually everything he signed from 1493 until his death in 1506, he used not a name at all, but the mysterious symbol .s. .s.a.s. XMY. XPO Ferens. It has never been deciphered. In 1500, after returning from his third voyage, Columbus wrote to a member of the Spanish court, "God made me the messenger of the new heaven and the new earth of which he spoke in the Apocalypse of St. John, after having spoken of it through the mouth of Isaiah, and he showed me the spot where to find it." The spot Columbus was referring to was the entrance to the Garden of Eden, which he claimed to have found in August 1498 off the coast of Venezuela. According to some religious writings, the righteous would once again inhabit their earthly paradise. Thus, Columbus's discovery of Eden satisfied a requirement necessary to prepare the way for the kingdom of God. In 1502, during his fourth voyage, he wrote to the king and queen that he had discovered the gold mines of Solomon in modern-day Panama. Solomon had built his temple in Jerusalem with gold from these mines. Ferdinand and Isabella, Columbus informed them, had been chosen by God to restore the temple with gold from these same mines. That year, Columbus assembled the Book of Prophecies, 84 pages of biblical and other religious prophecies that he claimed God had chosen to fulfill through him. By now, Columbus's ideas had crystallized into an elaborate messianic delusional system. Regaining the Holy Land, Columbus's original quest now became part of an even larger, more ambitious scheme to usher in the apocalypse, bringing all of human history to its climactic end. Historian Delano West summarized the logic of the Book of Prophecies. Secular history would end in 150 years. But before that awesome event, three prophesied milestones had to occur. 1, the discovery of the Indies. 2, the conversion of all people. And 3, the recapture and rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Columbus believed that he was the instrument of divine providence who had been chosen for these events. Columbus's illness clearly progressed as his thinking became more grandiose. Although Columbus did regard himself before and after 1492 as a man with a providential mission, in 1501 to 1502, Columbus linked the crusading tradition to an apocalyptic vision with himself, East, in the role of the Messiah. The Book of Prophecies was evidence that Columbus drifted away from reality and turned to mad ravings, according to biographer Gianni Granzato. One might think that being God's instrument to redeem human history would be sufficient reward in itself, but Columbus had to get rich off the deal as well, and that was non-negotiable. The pitch. In the 1990s, entrepreneurs seeking financial backing were advised to prepare an elevator pitch, a 15-second sales talk they could deliver to a venture capitalist if they had his ear only for a moment. Billion-dollar deals were made with such speed. Columbus had to make a 15-year sales pitch to launch his voyage of discovery. He spent the first 8 years trying to get his project off the ground in Portugal. King John's expert advisors correctly informed him that Columbus's calculations were grossly inaccurate. Columbus was, in fact, wrong in many of his basic assumptions. For example, he greatly underestimated the size of the Earth and overestimated the size of Asia's eastward extension. Both these miscalculations conveniently made his proposed journey seem much more achievable than it was. When finally given the opportunity to present his plan to King John, Columbus flattered the king, comparing him to Alexander the Great, Nero, and other great leaders who had commissioned legendary explorations, and he talked excitedly about the gold he would bring back. John's impression of Columbus was that he was more fanciful and imaginatively inspired than accurate in what he said, according to João de Barros, a faithful chronicler of Portuguese events at that time. In the play El Nuevo Mundo by Lope de Vega, first performed 100 years later, the king dismisses Columbus, saying, "Go get a cure for your insanity." Columbus was judged a madman, according to Granzato. In hindsight, John's failure to back Columbus appears wildly short-sighted, like passing up a chance to buy Manhattan for $24. But John's assessment of Columbus was not inaccurate. Columbus was driven by a fanciful imagination. Not trusting him was a rational decision. What was irrational was Columbus's faith in himself. The certainty of Columbus has itself been the subject of some scholarly curiosity. He was a stranger to doubt, wrote Granzato. Columbus was mystified that others could be so skeptical of his plan to find the Indies by sailing west. Ironically, he didn't find them, though though to his dying day he claimed that had Columbus not been so grandiose, he might have given up on his divine mission. Instead, Columbus went to Spain. One of his first stops was the Franciscan monastery in La Rabida. The Franciscans had an intense interest in cosmology. One of their most famous friars, Duns Scotus, had been among the first to assert that the world was round. Scotus had dared to disagree with Augustine, who claimed that the world to the east was an uninhabitable void. These Franciscans wanted to prove Duns Scotus right, and Columbus quickly convinced them that he was the man to do it. He sketched out his grand vision to Father Antonio de Marchena, a cosmologist well known at court, and Father Juan Perez, one of the Queen's confessors. They often spoke late into the night, and Columbus converted these priests into true believers. With their support, he won the right to make his pitch to the two most powerful monarchs in Europe. A night in Cordoba. Columbus had an audience with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in May 1486 at their residence in Cordoba. The king is said to have tired quickly and gone to bed, leaving Columbus alone with the queen. Legend has it that a sexual attraction emerged between Isabella and Christopher. They were both 35 years old and quite attractive. According to her secretary, Isabella was blonde with blue-green eyes, a gracious mien, and a lovely, merry face, most dignified in her movements. Columbus was tall in stature, with an aquiline nose and hair prematurely white. According to his son Ferdinand, who wrote a biography of his father, Pedro de las Casas, a contemporary of Columbus, who also wrote a biography, stated that he had a singular grace that induced others to see him easily with love. Hypomanics are often charming, persuasive, and attractive.